Hi everyone, Melanie here and welcome back to the channel. Thank you to all new subscribers and for everyone who's still supporting the channel. It means a lot to have your support. And just a quick reminder before I jump into the video that I do have another channel. The link to see that channel is in the video description. Love for your support there as well. Alright, so this video is dedicated to the many people who have emailed me asking me about questions about loving someone as intensely as they have with their BPDX. Is it right to love someone so intensely? And is it normal to want that love? And for that relationship with your ex, even though it was so dysfunctional and intense, it set a bar for you, and subsequent relationships can be quite boring. And the question that I'm answering in particular today is it wrong to love someone so intensely like I did with my BPDX? Is it right to love someone that intensely in general? Is that something that I shouldn't be looking for? And yet so many people find that relationships that are with more normal people, they don't quite measure up, they're not as exciting, and there's less motivation to seek out those relationships, and one can find themselves in another codependent, enmeshed, dysfunctional relationship. So I'd like to address all of these questions from my perspective. I'm going to start with a more psychological perspective and then a psycho-spiritual perspective. So in answer to the question of whether it's right or wrong, well, let's move beyond the concepts of what's right and wrong. And instead, let's shift our perspective to, how is this serving me? How is this type of love that I'm looking for serving me? How has it served me in the past? To move beyond whether something is good or bad, right or wrong, black and white, instead I invite you to now adopt a new mindset of thinking, well, how is this actually serving me? How are my thoughts, my beliefs, my mindsets, my choices, my actions in romantic relationships, how are they all serving me? Am I just replaying patterns from the past? And this is something so important to consider. Am I replaying dynamics from the past that I've witnessed growing up? The relationships that we witness as a child, primarily with our primary caregivers, so normally that's mum and dad and siblings, how we witness them interact with each other, we form inner templates that as an adult serve to guide us in future relationship choices. And it's also the relationships that we have with those parents ourselves. If you had a very enmeshed relationship with a family member, it's likely then that you may unconsciously be seeking out enmeshed relationships, replaying what's familiar to you. We all do this. All of us replay what is familiar. And it's only until we update our mindsets, our beliefs, when we can do this. This is when we can actually make better choices. But first, we need to have awareness. We need to actually realize what's going on. Otherwise, we just go unconscious and just keep repeating and repeating and repeating past dynamics and past behaviors and seeking out relationships from the past. So until you can get some self-awareness, a certain level of clarity about why you may be choosing these kind of relationships. Is it because of relationships that I'm familiar with in the past? This is something that's very important to consider, because change can only happen when we realize that maybe we've been programmed to think a certain way, to feel a certain way. And ultimately, the mind is very programmable. If you don't program it, someone else will. And it's your responsibility now as an adult to change your programming from the past. How is this all serving you? Are you sick and tired of being mistreated in a relationship? Then be honest with yourself, go within and see what are the patterns. What are the patterns in the choices that I make when it comes to choosing romantic partners? What are the patterns that I make in relationships? Always look at your patterns. They will be very revealing to you, but it needs to come with a willingness to go within and look within. My first piece of advice then is to ask yourself, how are my current behaviors, my mindsets, my actions, how are they serving me? Do I need to change? Am I just repeating what's familiar? And what is the motivation behind that? What is the drive behind that? The deeper you can go with these questions to understand what are your driving forces that motivate you to seek out certain kinds of relationships, certain kinds of people. If you consider that perhaps maybe that you may be wanting to reenact relationships from the past in an attempt to get corrective emotional experience. What I mean by that is to find a relationship in which you're reenacting the relationship you had with mum or dad, and there is a part of you that's hoping that with this relationship that you will be seen, you will get the love that you needed, that you deserved as a child. That's what I mean about corrective emotional experience. And many of us are just unconsciously driven to seek out things from the past that we have never got. And also we are put off and repulsed by things that remind us in the here and now of things that have happened to us in the past. So really the key in change is from going from unconscious to conscious, so that we are no longer driven by unconscious forces, and instead we start to choose how we wish to respond. And that is key here for personal growth, for self-mastery. So it all starts going within and questioning, being inquisitive, wondering why you are replaying certain habits. And the more that you can look within for the answers, in my opinion, more can be revealed to you. So in terms of whether loving someone so intensely like you have in this dysfunctional relationship, whether it's right or wrong, I really can't say. I mean, who am I to judge whether your love was right or wrong, whether to love someone that intensely is right or wrong? I'd like to answer this question with the phrase "non mi tangere," which is Latin for "don't touch me." And this is a Bible reference. This is the famous scene when Mary witnesses the resurrection, and these are the first words spoken to Jesus after Mary rushes over to him. So why am I talking about this? I'm inviting you to consider this on an inner psychological level, what these words mean symbolically, not literally. So bear in mind that originally the Bible was written in Greek, so this has been a translation from English to Latin to Greek. And the Greek originally, I'm not going to try to pronounce the words in Greek, but the original saying in Greek translates to "don't cling to me." And it's implying an ongoing action. It's not referring to like a one-off thing, like she's trying to grab onto him and he's like, "Nah, get off me." It means stop clinging to me, referring to an ongoing action and not a single action. And thinking about what this means on an inner symbolic level, psychologically, what this means, how I'm interpreting it anyway, it's referring to love from lower self versus love from higher self. So what I mean by lower and higher self, well, let's see Mary Magdalene in this scene representing lower self from the level of ego. And this is what we tend to operate in on a daily basis. It's wanting things and needing things and clinging on to things and owning things. And this is what love is represented at the level of ego, at the level of lower self, if you wish to call it. And then Jesus represents higher self and loving from higher self and what that means. So if you're not familiar with the term higher self, at least how I was taught it in psychosynthesis, the style of counselling that I trained in, is the aspect of you that is already whole, already complete, and doesn't exist on the physical. Well, you as a physical aspect, emanation of it, is just an emanation of it. You're just one aspect of the totality that is you. And the whole you, all of you, it's not just your physical body, it's so much more than that. You are so much more than your physical body, your feelings, your thoughts at any given moment. That is you, but you are more than that. And getting to that place of more than, to me, that is higher self. This is the direction that I'm aiming towards during personal evolution and spiritual unfolding to who I'm meant to be. That's the direction. Much like the lotus flower, it grows in the mud in the pond, and through the mud it grows, and then when it reaches the surface and above the water, it then flowers. And to me, that is symbolic of self-realization, the journey of personal growth. So the mud, growing through the mud that is ego, and then unfolding above the water, self-realization, enlightenment, becoming higher self, becoming the awoken one. From a Buddhist perspective, Buddha was the name for the awoken one. Siddhartha Gautama changed his name to the Buddha to symbolize this, that he has awoken to higher self. He sees reality for as it is. Okay, so back to Nole mi tangere and how this could answer your question. Is it right or is it wrong to love someone as intensely? Instead of seeing it as right or wrong, see it perhaps as loving from different places, loving from lower self, and how we could shift this into loving from higher self. And ultimately, it's not either or. I'm not saying one is better and one is worse. It's both unnecessary, and realistically, I don't think we can always operate from higher self. It's inevitable that we'll be drawn into daily dramas of the world. It really is. However, to gain control and to realize that you have a choice in any given moment about how you wish to respond to someone in a situation, how you choose to feel, you have all the choice. So it's understanding how it is to love someone from ego, from lower self, from a place of control, versus loving from higher self. Great love, ultimately, if that's what you're looking for, great love. I consider it as something that is very passionate and also detached at the same time. It's not an addiction. The controlling, addictive aspect of love in the dysfunctional relationship, wanting more and more and more and not being satisfied, I would consider that coming from lower self. And often this is coming from the past, living out of the past and having expectations about how things should be, having desires that are unquenching. You find that they're unsatiable. No matter how much more you keep getting what you want, it's just not enough. To me, this all symbolizes love from lower self. Higher self, on the other hand, is already complete, is already perfect, and does not require anything or anyone or any situation for it to be complete. It already is. Higher self can love and let go, but lower self really struggles with this and wants to be in control. And often this comes as wanting to control someone else, the person you love, through manipulating them. Whether that's from being too much of a people pleaser and doing everything for them so that they become complacent and dependent on you, or whether that's mistreating them and completely being unempathic to their needs. Lower self really struggles with letting go and surrendering sometimes. But ultimately, this needs to happen. There needs to be a surrendering of the will of ego to the will of higher self. And I witnessed this personally myself when I used to go to pujas in my Buddhist center. I used to go visit in London. And part of the pujas, people would go one by one and they would prostrate themselves. They would lie down in front of the Buddha and do their thing. I don't know. And I would ask my meditation teacher afterwards, why are people doing that when they go in front of the Buddha statue? And he goes, well, you're surrendering the will of your ego to the will of your higher self, basically. And the Buddha represents your higher self. It's the symbology of having a ritual in which you do surrender, and prostrating yourself, bowing down, is that the act of bowing down to your higher self is relinquishing control of the ego and of your lower self in that moment. And it's only through doing this that you can really appreciate the words in which I'm saying here about coming from higher self, about letting go of the need to control another person, surrendering to what is, to trust and to let go, and to still love. This is coming from higher self. This is love without attachment. So coming from a more Buddhist perspective now, since I started talking about Buddhism, the first tenet of Buddhism, one of the first noble truths is that the world is suffering. You can't avoid suffering. Suffering exists. And yet, this is a pragmatic way, Buddhism, in my opinion, to how to overcome the suffering, basically, how to see suffering within yourself. And that is to A, realize that suffering does happen, and B, the second noble truth is that desire and ignorance can lead to suffering. It is desire and becoming attached, overly attached. That means that we end up suffering. And this is the context in which I think this applies to what I'm talking about. It's not wanting something in the first place that's wrong. There is nothing wrong about having desires. It's when we become overly attached to the point that we become dependent. I personally believe that it's very powerful to learn to love from higher self, to come from a place where you're not trying to control someone else. You're not dependent upon the other person to give you what you need from the past. With that in mind, we could translate what Jesus meant when he said, "Noli me tangere." He could have meant, don't cling on to the past, Mary, or what you think you need or you deserve. We're all heading for bigger and better things. If you can allow your ego to surrender, allow yourself to be open to loving from higher self. And what does that mean? It means to love without controlling someone else. That you don't need to have someone according to how you wish they would be or how you need for them to be in order for you to feel happy. Now, of course, there are expectations around relationships. For example, monogamy and treating each other with respect. Whatever the rules are for your relationship, it's not to say that you just let someone do whatever they want to do. It means coming from a place of trust. So choosing relationships in which you can build trust. You choose partners in which you can trust them. Often people who do have trust issues, sometimes they choose relationships in which they don't have to get that deep. Or perhaps people will end up replaying relationships from the past in which they choose people who are untrustworthy because they are reenacting the wounding from the past in which they have been betrayed. To love without attachment doesn't mean that you shouldn't have desire in the first place. It's not about that. It's to not let your desires control you, to not let your attachments control you, so that you have choice. And this needs to come from a place of trust and trust that everything's going to be okay and that you can still love with the person is in or not in your life. And in fact, for many of my clients, a way for them to move on from their dysfunctional relationship is to learn to love from afar. It's okay if you still love your borderline ex and you're not in the relationship with them. Maybe you're not even talking with them anymore. It's okay to love someone and let them go, to love them from afar. And it's fine. It's perfectly fine to be in a loving state of not needing to control others, of not needing things to be a certain way in order for you to feel happy. What this does, this elevates you, this raises your energy, and you're in a state of love, of being in love. You're no longer motivated by needing love. You already are love. And like attracts like. And I do believe that the more you can stay in this state, the more likely you will meet people who are also resonating with you at this level. So let's move beyond right or wrong about whether it's right or wrong to love someone as intensely, but instead see it as, how is it helping me? How is it serving me? Is it keeping me in a rut in which I am just replaying familiar relationships from the past and having the wounds reenacted and reopened each time? To question about why you're motivated to seek out certain relationships and to go within. The answers are within you, and sometimes it just takes time for clarity to come, for the penny to drop, the aha moment. My Alan Partridge impression there. Aha. That's the moments we're going for in counselling, to have those moments of clarity in which you have self-awareness and you are, symbolically speaking, shining a light into the dark of your unconscious. And it's only when you start to do this can you then be empowered to make different choices and to make changes in your relationships and how you talk to yourself and your beliefs. It all starts with you and you changing it. And to be honest with yourself, are you loving purely out of lower self? When we love purely out of this level, we operate in a way that's mechanical, and we end up often in codependent relationships, looking to the next friendship or the next romantic relationships in which we can meet the unmet needs of our inner child, to meet the needs from the past that we're still looking for. We return time and time again back into patterns and interactions which are familiar to us, And these are often codependent and enmeshed relationships if we ourselves have experienced this as children growing up. Perhaps then the way forward is to develop a stronger connection to higher self, what you consider to be higher self, and develop the I-self connection, which I talk about in this book, The Primal Wound, which, by the way, my next video will be talking about books that I recommend to help heal from trauma. And yeah, this is one of them, The Primal Wound. They talk about the I-self connection, the connection you have with higher self, and how to develop this. And perhaps by developing this connection, we can then come from higher self and learn to love in a way that is spiritual non-attachment, I guess you can say. There are other references to loving from higher self in the Bible, and I shall give you another example. So I've got it on my laptop because I don't know it off by heart. This is Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So how I'm interpreting this is love from higher self, love that is beyond ego. It's love from higher self that is always is, and doesn't dissipate, and is always there, and is not conditional, like how many of us who grew up in dysfunctional families came to see love as being conditional. I will love you if you are being a certain way, or if you're doing what I want you to do, and I won't love you if you are doing this or you're doing that. What I'm talking about here is healing the wounds from the past by addressing, well, are there times when I'm loving purely out of lower self and I see love as someone needs to be treating me this way in order for me to feel this way? And you become dependent on other people to provide these conditions in order for you to heal. What I'm suggesting is shifting your perspective and loving others and yourself from higher self is going within and healing yourself, not looking to others to heal you, but you healing yourself. I believe it's also, I don't know if it's in the Bible, but the saying, God helps those who help themselves. It means you can change when you internalize your locus of control, when you seek to help yourself by assuming responsibility. Mental health issues and trauma, it's not your fault, but your responsibility definitely is. So let's move beyond whether it's right or wrong to love someone as intensely, but instead I challenge you to think, how is it serving me? And perhaps I should be practicing more non-attachment in my love. And it's not just in the actions in a relationship with someone, but non-attachment to your mindsets, your beliefs, your memories, your experience, to be able to let things go in order for new experiences to come into your life. Like a snake is always shedding its skin because it's outgrown its old skin, so we too humans need to shed on an inner level. And when we cling on to the past and refuse to let go, and we keep reenacting the past, this will create suffering. And it's up to us to learn to shed, basically, to let go. And sometimes just shifting your perspective helps, which is why I make these videos, to inspire you to think a bit differently, perhaps. And sometimes this is all it takes for you to get some insights and to go further on your journey. So I'll leave it there. There's more to say on this. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. So if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts about what I've been talking about, I would love to hear them. Do email me. My email address is in the video description. Do check out my other channel, and yeah, I'll leave it there. All right, well, have an awesome day and take care. Bye for now.